The topic for today is a poem entitled Caring for Others' Sympathy by Charles Mackay. Now at first we would like to know, or rather like to learn something about the poet. Although much information is not provided. Charles Mackay was a Scottish poet, a songwriter and a journalist. Now, who is a journalist? He or she is a person who gathers news from his news reporting team, compiles and edits them, and finally sends it for printing. As I was saying, Mackay was a songwriter too. During his lifetime, he became immensely popular because of his songs. His early life was spent in France. He acted as a reporter during the American Civil War, fought between 1861 up to 1865. He died in London on 24th December 1889. Now, I will read each stanza and then go for further explanation. First, I'm going to read the stanzas one by one, and then I'm going to give explanation for each of them, and at last a detailed explanation for the entire poem. In this poem, Sympathy, the poet describes an incident that happened to him. Now let us read the poem. The first stanza, I lay in sorrow, deep distressed. My grief a proud man heard. His looks were cold, he gave me gold, but not a kindly word. So, in the first stanza, the poet describes an incident that occurred to him once. It happened that once he was lying on the ground, probably due to any unfortunate accident. He was lying there in a state of sorrow and a feeling of hopelessness in his mind. At that point of time, a rich man came to him and handed him some money in the form of gold coins. But somehow the poet felt that the man took a lot of pride in being wealthy. His attitude, his looks, his way of moving spoke that he was very haughty or he was very proud. He gave money to the poet probably for the sake of giving alms to the poor. He had looks which were very cold, but he did not speak a word of kindness. There was no emotion on the man's face. He did not even speak a word to the poet or try to console him. Now let us come to the second stanza of the poem. My sorrow past, I paid him back the gold he gave to me, then stood erect and spoke my thanks and blessed his charity. It incidentally happened that the poet recovered from his state of misfortune and decided to meet the rich man, or the proud man as he may be called, and pay him back the money with a lot of good wishes. The poet wished that the rich man might be rewarded by God for his charitable work. According to the poet, giving alms to the poor is a work of charity, as we all know. But as the rich man had given him some money, so the poet also considered that the rich man had done some charity and he needed, or he was liable to be rewarded by God. So it was a wish on the part of the poet. Now let us go to the third stanza of the poem. I lay in want, in grief and pain. A poor man passed my way. He bound my head, he gave me bread, he watched me night and day. There was another such occasion when the poet was again lying down on the ground. Probably another misfortune struck him, and he was there, brutally injured, hungry, as well as in a sorrowful and pitiful condition. It happened that a poor man passed by and offered to take care of the poet. The poor man nursed the poet's head. He bound the poet's head with proper cloth and medicines, whatever he could gather, and he spoke kind words to the poet. He spoke sympathetic words to the poet. He offered to take care of the poet day and night. The poor man did not have any means, or rather we should say he did not have proper means to survive. So it was a rather great thing on his part to take care of the poet in spite of he being poor. So this poor man was gentle and caring and looked after the poet until he recovered fully. Now let us come to the fourth stanza. How shall I pay him back again for all he did to me? O God is great, but greater far is heavenly sympathy. Now the poet was in a dilemma. He did not know what to do. He was absolutely clueless about how to pay the poor man back. He knew that money itself was not enough for the man, because the poor man offered him sympathy, offered him kind words, offered him words of consolation when he was in dire need for it. So the poem has a universal message. It is one for all the times. It shows how human sympathy is worth far more than money itself. Now let us come into a little more detailed explanation. So you see that in this poem, the poet describes two separate incidents that occurs in his life. Charity or being charitable can be shown in two different ways. The first way is by providing financial help to the distressed, the poor and the needy, which is initially done by the rich and proud man. The rich man finds the poet in extreme condition. He was lying there on the ground in a state of sorrow, in a state of hopelessness, absolutely bruised. And so he does not show any kind of emotion and just remains silent by offering him money for treatment. And according to the poet, he or the rich man helps the poet physically. However, the poet is devastated to understand or to feel that there was no sign of emotion attached to the man's action, no words of consolation which can encourage the poet. So the poet is never encouraged by the actions of the proud and the rich man, because he feels that the rich man understands nothing but money. According to the rich man, money could buy everything in this world. And therefore, this kind of charity is not at all required by the poet. Now, the other face of charity, as we see in the second occasion, the poor man comes forward to help him. It is consolation or sympathy that the poet is seeking for, and it comes in the form of the poor man who, despite having no proper means of helping the poet, chooses to do so, probably because the poor man himself had experienced this kind of condition earlier. The poor man offers food, that is bread, to the poet because he was extremely hungry. He nursed the wounds of the poet by tying the wound that was on the head of the poet. He took utmost care of the poet so that the latter recovers fast, both physically and mentally. So the poet does not know how to repay the poor man for all that he did to him. He was some sort lying in a condition of dilemma about how to pay back the poor man who himself does not have any means of survival. And so he decides that it is the second option or the second charity what he is seeking for. He wants emotion, or rather he is seeking for emotion. He is seeking for words of consolation from a person besides money. Money can temporarily help a man when he is in dire consequences, but a person who does not have any proper means, when that particular person helps another one who is in dire distress, that person could be called as a genuine human being. So the poet chooses to say that God is great, the Almighty is all powerful, but it is sympathy which makes a man happier than ever. It is sympathy which is the greatest virtue, and whoever possesses this virtue, whoever possesses love and care for others, whoever expresses this kind of genuine human emotion is a genuine human being. Now we have completed the poem. Now take a pen and a notebook and note down the questions that are probably from this small poem. The first question is, in what condition was the poet lying at first? I repeat, in what condition was the poet lying at first? Question number 2. Who heard his grief and what did he do? I repeat, who heard his grief and what did he do? Question 3. Why was the poet unhappy with the rich man? I repeat, why was the poet unhappy with the rich man? Question number 4. How did the poor man help him when he was in distress? I repeat, how did the poor man help him when he was in distress? The last question, what message does the poet want to convey to us? I repeat, what message does the poet want to convey to us? So these are the questions that have been given for homework. Try to solve them at home, and if you find any difficulty, we will meet together once again and then we are going to sort them out.